Hello, this is David.
And this is Salome! I'm so sorry to your guys' ears. Oh my god, I just realized how bad that's going to be in their ears.
Oh gosh, yes. All right. Strauss week. Okay, Mrs. Strauss. All right, Mrs. Strauss. We had enough of that. But anyways, this is David and Salome, and
Hola.
welcome to Something Old, Something New, the podcast where we choose two films, one old, one new, that have something in common, and what that is depends on the films. This week we are taking a look at Stanley Kubrick's monumental masterpiece, the 1968 release of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and James Gray's recently released 2019 Ad Astra, starring Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Now, let's do a little bit of an update here. We promised in our last episode that we were going to provide updates because we were going to be doing a Disneyland trip. But unfortunately, life happens, and we couldn't be able to provide all those, little updates going to Disneyland.
That's just life itself.
Yeah, I know. That's what happened. Life itself got back to us for attacking life itself. So, because of that, unfortunately, we didn't do that, but we promised that we will be going to Disneyland in the near future because we're Disney freaks, and we will provide updates from there.
Yeah, and also y'all might want to start, subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, because there's going to be some pretty fun new content we're planning behind the scenes right now that it's going to be pretty cool.
Yep.
So you guys might want to start checking out for that.
Yep, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That's at SOSN Podcast. You can also look us up at Podbean and Spotify too, I believe.
Yes.
Yep. Once again, SOSN Podcast. Something old, something new.
Yes. All right. Let's stop plugging. All right.
Yes.
Let's go.
Let's do it to it.
Yes, because I always say I'm super excited, but this one really did excite me.
Yes.
It's something.
Yeah, because the thing is, with 2001: A Space Odyssey and Ad Astra, it's these two movies are the reasons. They are the reasons why we go to the movies in terms of what we can do, what artists can do. In the case of Stanley Kubrick and James Gray and their teams of these wonderfully talented actors and cinematographers, film editors, production designers, visual effects teams, sound mixers, everybody involved, that you can use all of these elements and create these two wonderfully made movies.
Yeah, I really liked both of these movies.
Yeah.
And that's kind of rare.
Yeah. And so what we're looking at is, of course, that these are films dealing with space exploration. But of the two, it's pretty safe to say that Ad Astra is definitely more emotional in terms of its content. That it is. I mean, the thing about James Gray is that before this movie, that he made smaller, intimate, dramatic films. I mean, the previous film to this was actually a little bit more expensive than that. I think it was The Lost City of Z. I believe that was the name of the film.
Yeah, Brad Pitt was tied to that movie at first to star in, right? Before, there was some scheduling conflict, so he ended up becoming an executive producer for that movie.
Yeah.
So I think that's what the link was. So they ended up still working together, which was thankfully a good thing.
Yeah, with Ad Astra. Because with Ad Astra, Brad Pitt doesn't just star in it, he also co-produces it as well.
Oh, does he?
Yeah,
Okay,
through his
cool.
production company, Plan B. But it is definitely more of an emotional story because James Gray was known for that in his career, that in his previous films that he would do that sort of thing. So this film, and you could have not set it in space, but it's made so much better through that because it's used as a metaphor.
Yeah, and
for that drama.
It's kind of funny because I didn't even think of that until you pointed it out to me. That you would tell me pretty much this storyline didn't have to be in space, and I'm like, holy shit, you're right. It didn't have to be, but it didn't take away from the fact that it was, and it was so beautifully made. I really enjoyed both films, and I'm not a space movie film person. Remember, I fought you when it came to when you wanted to watch Gravity. I fought you on that one. I was like, guys, I ended up loving it, but it's movies like that are not usually geared towards people like me. I genuinely hate movies like that.
Yeah.
But honestly, these two movies changed my mind completely.
Yeah, especially because of what you can do with it. Because The thing, and also let's get these out of the way. What are the movies about?
Yeah.
In 2001: A Space Odyssey is, if there is indeed a plot, because it is, if anything, you could look at it like there. I mean, there is one, but it's more of like a series of connecting images in terms of how we follow the essentially man's evolution.
Yeah,
What we see from
it's a story of evolution. That's literally what it's about.
and progress and how far how far we've come. That we go from the dawn of man to millions of years later. Now we're like, in 2001, and they discover another monolith, because what happens is that the apes touch the monolith, the hominids, they touch the monolith, and then suddenly they become intelligent. They start walking upright, using the bones of the wildlife, a tapir in this case, as a weapon. And then years down the line, they find another monolith under the surface of the moon, and then they go off on
I thought
Jupiter.
it was the same one.
Oh no, it's a different one.
Interesting.
Because what happens is the monolith, it's essentially.
I thought it traveled. It's like it's where it's supposed to be.
Oh no! It's what happens is the monolith leads them on that path. So you have the first one that was presented to the hominids, and then that points them to the direction of the moon, and then the next one points them into the direction of Jupiter, and then
it's guiding mankind where they're supposed to be in order to evolve.
Of where to go, until finally at the end of the film, spoilers, that the final evolution occurs where man becomes a star
big
child.
baby.
A big baby, the star child. And in the case of Ad Astra, and it's so funny we're talking about this, it's like how big and epic it is. Well, Ad Astra is about how Brad Pitt is finding himself emotionally distant from the human race, period. He's an astronaut, just like his father, who has been missing for nearly 30 years, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was about 30 years, yeah.
About 20, like 16, 20, a great amount of time. And suddenly these electric waves are hitting Earth. It's apocalyptic times. It's like
it's killing people.
Yeah, if another wave hits, that's it. And they believe that his father is alive, and that's then discovered that the father is responsible for this. And it's up to Brad Pitt to go and try to communicate with him to get him to stop doing this.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, like when it came to that movie, what I loved about it, that actually both movies, like, when you're describing them, they sound so epic and kind of like, how is that going to work? But something that both movies made that I used to have issues with in certain other movies, but this really made me appreciate it, is how matter-of-factly a lot of the movie was. Like, this is the world. You as an audience, you will know this world already, so let's just keep going.
Yeah.
And it was very, very interesting, and it kind of made you be involved in the movie in some way. Like, it was pretty cool.
Yeah. And when it comes to like the emotional, like, let's get this out of the way. When it comes to the emotional connection, that is in 2001, and that's nothing against any of the actors involved in the film, Gary Lockwood or Keira Dalia and such, but it's more safer to say that they aren't as well known as, say, Brad Pitt.
Well, I mean, were the actors well known for their time when it came out in '68, or no?
To my knowledge, not as. I mean, it's not like
as a Brad Pitt.
Yeah,
status
it's not like, say, like Rock Hudson, who famously walked out of 2001, with the great line of, "Will someone tell me what the hell this is about?"
No, here's the thing though, that's funny because I had the same reaction as I was watching it, but not in the negative way that he might have meant. I don't know which way he meant it. I'm guessing he meant negatively, but
negatively. I'm
yeah.
certainly.
But here's the thing though, that's what I was thinking, like, and it goes into the emotional part, that throughout this movie, I was like, where the fuck is this going? But the confusion didn't take away from it. It goes back to the evolution thing. Like, it's just, we don't know how us as humans are going to evolve 1,000 years from now. Hopefully the world is still here, whatever. But like, it's just like, so it kind of brought you on that journey with it. So like, you were mentioning that because the actors weren't as famous, that like, did you feel that kind of took away from it for you, or?
Oh no, it enhances it.
Okay.
In 2000, well, here's the thing. In 2001, the fact that we don't have, say, at the time, let's just use some prominent actors coming. Like, let's say they didn't cast, like if they cast, like, say, a Sidney Poitier, or if they cast, Dustin Hoffman was coming up at the time, or a Gene Hackman, or Warren Beatty, that's another one, or Robert Redford, Paul Newman. If you were casting actors like that, it would, in my opinion, take away from what Kubrick is trying to tell in the story. But in the case of Ad Astra, the casting of Brad Pitt, it works because Brad Pitt is in every single scene in the movie, unless I'm mistaken. I think he's in every single scene of the
I don't
film.
remember any scene where he was not in. It was just like
Yeah.
a cutaway and then back to him, but he was in the room apparently.
And so we're with them. And the thing is, when it comes to the different approaches that they take, that Brad Pitt, as stated, he's emotionally distant from the human race. He's estranged from his wife. He has this, and he says this throughout a narration, which is it's a cross between Terrence Malick's work, the narration that he would use in his movies, but also brings up comparisons to the narration from Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now. It's like a cross between those two, which Brad Pitt does a very good job at that. And just in general, Pitt's performance is just fantastic. But that's the point, because Pitt is going on this emotional journey where his heart rate never goes above 80, even when he's falling in a spectacular sequence, when he's falling from orbit to Earth. Never goes above 80. He finds himself in that losing connection with humanity. So when you get to experience as part of him traveling from Earth to the moon, and subsequently from the moon to Mars, as presented in
and then
in
from
Ad
Mars
Astra,
to
Neptune. The thing is that, well, by that point, from Mars to Neptune, that's when he's starting to become more connected. It's allowing his emotions to come into to fruition. But the thing is that it's these wonderfully beautiful images that James Gray, shows us, and Hoyt van Hoytma's cinematography. He also did Interstellar with Christopher Nolan, another wonderful space epic. That you're seeing these beautiful images, but it's done in such a way, edited and shot, where we're presented it in your beautiful images, but you feel this detachment from it, where you'll see Brad Pitt, and it's shot in widescreen. So Brad Pitt would be on, let's say, the left side of the frame completely, but then the right side would be empty, or or if there's like characters that are like in widescreen where he's once again on the left and they're way over on the right.
Yeah, he's isolation, pretty much. And also when you're talking about like it being black, it's kind of just symbolizing, I don't want to say his heart, but like it's just where he's at. Like, he's just cold. Just his character. I love the evolution of his character throughout the whole movie, and he did it so beautifully. Because like, and the really great thing about how this movie was made is that how David pointed out that it started off like you're not really connecting with the imagery around you, even as regardless how beautiful it is. But it's done for a reason, because since you're seeing everything kind of pretty much from Brad Pitt's character's point of view, you have to feel disconnected as well. And like you said, throughout the movie, you kind of start getting more attached, just like his character's starting to get a little bit more attached to whether the mission or certain ideas or whatever it may be.
But there are hints.
They are hints, yeah.
Mention the one specific tell that Brad Pitt brilliantly does when they say, "We think your father's alive."
Yes, and this is actually one of my favorite scenes of a film, and it's very subtle that Brad Pitt did this one thing, because like he was in the very beginning, his character was very matter of fact. Like they have these little things where it's like a psychological analysis before they go to space or whatever, and you meet Brad Pitt's character as him giving his analysis, just like I slept well today, I feel good today, I did this, and I feel this, and I'm ready for my mission, whatever, right? So you get the sense of what kind of man Brad Pitt's character is. So in this scene, like he walks in, they tell him like, okay, you're not just here because of what happened to you earlier in the movie, which if you guys want to see, go watch it. But he's like, we think your father's alive. And then Brad Pitt's face, there's not much movement to his face, but one of the only things is his jaw clenches a little bit more.
Yep.
And that's the first sign of emotion you get from this character.
Yeah.
And I got chills when I saw like this one, because when you see Brad Pitt's face, like, hello. But two, it's just like that moment, and like, that's how I was able to connect to the character right away. Because it's like, as someone, like, and obviously you know me, you're married to me, that people who deal with whether like mental illness or certain disorders, that like you kind of have this wall up. You've been hurt before. You do not want to be hurt by anyone else. So you are in control of your emotions. Well, as one thinks, whatever, right? So when you get news like that, you try to keep your composure. And this man is very, very, he was trained to keep his composure. But just that one slight of movement that he was not able to control, that tighten, and he's just like, oh shit, this is the beginning of something.
Yeah.
And I got chills at that moment.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
Because it's not just, with father and son relationships, but it also takes, as James Gray would point out when he talks about the film, is that that it's also a critique on masculinity in movies, and how as men we are trained to wall ourselves off, that we don't show off our emotions and such. And also, this is the second great performance from Brad Pitt, the first being Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, released this year, and which you can, if you want to know our views on that movie, check out our second episode, Reservoir Dogs and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, available in the archives. But to compare that to 2001: A Space Odyssey, how the performances are, they are fine performances. Not really emotional performances per se, even though I think Keir Dullea, towards the end, when the Daisy sequence, when he's turning off Hal's, removing the memory train.
Oh, God, that was such a good, creepy scene. Oh, my God.
But the emotional performances, in a way, comes from Douglas Rain's performance as Hal, the voice. That even though it's, as parody, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. But just the moment where he's like, stop. Don't do this. It's like my memory is going. I can feel it. And in a weird way,
the manipulation of technology. Oh, God.
Yeah, but it's like how Rains does it. How that voice, it's like, yes, it's cold and very, but it's also like, bear in mind that it's also supposed to be tried to be human as well, but not, because it's, after all, it's a computer, the HAL 9000 computer. It's going through an emotional, it's going through this emotional trial here for this computer, that it's, I think, if my memory serves, I think Arthur C. Clarke, who co-wrote the script with Stanley Kubrick, I think that the reason why he was acting that way, why he was acting so strange, was because that it was his unease with the mission of how that he wanted to make certain that the mission goes successfully, but it kind of created this weird effect. But that's not presented in the movie because, quite frankly, we don't need that.
Yeah.
We don't need that information at all. But it's interesting to me how the performances are, where one is it's more of a humane approach, looking into how one needs to essentially come back to Earth, and the other is more focused on how
the evolution and getting away from it,
how grand and epic it is, and how far we've come. It's a very hopeful film, 2001.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you say that. Like, Ad Astra brought more of the human element to it. When I have never felt such more of a human element than watching 2001, and it all had to do with the timing.
Yeah.
That, like, one of the unrealistic parts about movies, and it's done for a very good reason, just, when it comes to time, is that things cut really quickly. And that's, like, comparing both movies, like, with 2001, the most brilliant thing that it did is that it took its time.
Yeah.
And when I mean it took its time, I mean it literally took its time. It didn't rush its actors. It's like if it was real life and you were standing there experiencing all of this.
Yeah.
And I've never had any feeling like that ever with a movie.
Yeah.
That I was like, and I think that where it really, really clicked was, and I think it was more towards the end. It clicked throughout the whole thing, but then I was able to understand why. It was towards like that part where it was the old guy, he sat down on the table.
Or when Dave has become, by this point, Dave has gone through Jupiter Beyond the Infinite, the Stargate sequence, and now he's finding himself lost in time, getting older.
Yeah, and then like time is no longer relevant. That time just passes by so freaking quickly. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I kind of heard in an interview that was kind of like giving the feeling of like, that people were questioning of like, did they go to a different dimension? Did they, like, what happened? And that someone said, like, is it possible that they ended up like at an alien quote unquote zoo, and then they were just there to be observed at this point, and they just spent the rest of their days there in that room? But anyways, so during that one scene, there was one part where, like, I guess he kind of looks at himself when he's older, or we're watching the movie. I cannot explain the scene, but he goes towards the table, he slowly opens like the chair, sits down, and then he just like, I know some people get this moment, like when you sit down after a long day and you kind of sit still, like, and you kind of let your bones adjust a little bit to like the gravity of the chair, and then you're sitting down, and then you kind of just let yourself go. That in another movie, usually now you would not see that.
Yeah.
You would not see that. Would have been like they open they get the chair and then it cuts to them already sitting down in the middle, whatever, but it doesn't give you that time like real life would.
Yeah.
So I just found that so fascinating and so beautifully made.
Because I mean, I think that like another great example of it would be the two space docking sequences set to Johann Strauss's The Blue Danube, and that is the film takes its time and its cuts in the music.
Yep.
And that is because the other thing about the music as well is that, I mean, usually when people use classical music, that sometimes it comes off as, being silly or parody. I mean, how often do you
Yes.
now hear the William Tell Overture without thinking Hi Ho Silver Away, for example? That it's gotten to that point. But how Stanley Kubrick uses the music in 2001 is that it enhances, and that before you know it, it comes off as a ballet where you're watching
very operatic.
Yeah,
for
where
sure.
you're watching the ship as it moves with the space station, and as they move as one, as if two dancers at the same time.
That's literally what I was thinking, and I had this feeling of like, for a second, I genuinely forgot we were watching a movie, and I felt like we were at the ballet.
Yeah.
One, it helps that we have surround sound at home, but
Oh
like,
yeah, which I highly recommend to everybody.
Yes.
It's when it comes to 2001 and Ad Astra, and in the case of 2001, we have high definition television set and surround sound and all that. But if there's an opportunity for us to go see 2001 in theaters, we're going to take
watch
it.
it.
If you get an opportunity to see 2001 in a movie theater with a great sound and picture quality, go. Same for Ad Astra.
Yeah.
Those are two movies that have to be seen, must be seen in theaters.
I completely agree. And going back to a little bit to the timing part that you were saying, they were both saying that like with 2001, it took its time and it serviced the film. There was a point to it, right? So the lack of timing with Ad Astra, it was one of those movies that we talked about earlier that we kind of had to sit at. Like both movies are very artistic in a way that you kind of have to let it sit with you a little bit to understand certain things. Because I remember in the very beginning of after we watched Ad Astra, I walked out and I was like, I don't like the fact that they didn't really show, like, they showed these visually beautiful, like scenes with like space or the I loved Neptune, how they showed Neptune. It was so beautiful.
Oh.
But I was like, why didn't I get enough time with that? Like, not with Neptune, but the very, like, earlier on in the movie with a lot of the other space stuff. And the more I thought of it, the more I was like, well, duh, because we had to feel as isolated as Brad Pitt did.
Yeah.
Like he grew up among the stars pretty much. His father was an astronaut, and then he grew up to be an astronaut, and he thought that, it's just like, that's what it is to be a man. Like, you pretty much are distant and closed off. So the fact that the timing was like that throughout the beginning of the movie was brilliant, but I had to let that one sit.
Yeah.
Because I'm usually just used to, because we're at the time in society that everything's at the palm of our hand, instant gratification type of thing, and movies are usually made that way now.
Or even like science fiction, fantasy films. And this was at the same time with, back then with when Kubrick was making 2001, that the challenges were when it came to science fiction was you had movies like, or science fiction fantasy, it was either stuff like, Operation Moon or The Day the Earth Stood Still or Them. And that's no knock against those movies.
No,
or
not
This
at all.
Island Earth, where it's like, or the idea of aliens is that usually it's like either these are sentient beings that are either benevolent and they come to us in terms of peace, or they come to us and they want to kill us.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what the intentions are.
Yeah.
But
what's happening is that he, in this case with Kubrick with 2001, is that how it's presented that he has to face those battles with these movies that have like set to triumphant bombastic scores that are deliberately the composer's job is to, because they're writing original score. In this case, Alex North wrote the original score for 2001 that was then subsequently released, so everybody can definitely listen to what what his intentions were.
Yeah.
But North was deliberately writing music set to the images, while Kubrick used the music that they didn't, the Strauss said he didn't know that he wasn't setting the Blue Danube to a scene of a spaceship docking into a space station.
Right.
But just how he was able to do it, and suddenly you become immersed in those images and taking your time, because let's compare it to, say, a Star Wars, where it's like, you get, the Millennium Falcon going through space, and, John Williams' score, and you pew, 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 you hear all those sound effects. But Kubrick doesn't go for that. He wants to go for as realistic as he can, or as realistic he can go in terms of what information was presented in 1968.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, what I love that you bring up that realistic thing, because he didn't use any film design people. Like, he actually partnered with. I'll just pretty much say partnered with NASA. Like, that's one of the most. And you tell me if I'm wrong. But like, this is one of the only movies I know of where how, other than a biography film, I guess, but how realistic and how real they wanted things to be. In the sense, like, they even talked to other corporations, like 40 other corporations, to talk about like what they thought was going to be in 2001, what kind of gadgets. And it was kind of funny throughout the whole film. But like, one of the big examples, like when one of the characters was in the station, or am I mixing up movies? No. And there was like pretty much what FaceTime was, right? Was that in Ad Astra or in 2001?
Well, it's actually in
both, right?
But here's the thing: in Ad Astra, it has the benefit of it's set in the future, but we don't know what specific year in Ad Astra. And by that point, we already are aware of we got iPhones and iPads and computers and how far they've gone.
Oh, yeah.
In the case of 2001, they had to do their research into that. So something like when he was the father and the daughter in 2001.
Yes, okay, so I am thinking of the right movie. Okay,
we're essentially talking to each other where he unfortunately had to miss her birthday. What she wants is a Bush baby. But they are FaceTiming.
Yeah, well, that's what goes back to what you're saying, that he was basing it on actual research from back in the day, because during that time they were trying to develop technology like that, which ended up becoming what FaceTime would be, or Skype or stuff like that. And I thought it was so brilliant because they even based a lot of like their stuff in that movie on this NASA project called like Project Orion or something like that. So it's like specifically with the spaceship. So throughout the whole movie, I was in awe of how beautiful the spaceships were, and it didn't feel cartoony at all or fake at all, which I always had an issue with certain older movies.
Yeah.
And it's because they actually based the designs on what NASA was working on for future projects, what they projected to happen by 2001. They tried to get as close as possible to that. So I feel that that's why that movie felt so realistic, that at least, which is another thing. I was so surprised that this movie was made in the 60s. I literally thought this was the 80s. That's why I was like, okay, the technology here seems to be like, some of the stuff seems like we're going in the right direction in our time now in 2019.
And what's brilliant about it was because of Stanley Kubrick's partnership with special effects expert Douglas Trumbull, who is just a master in terms of visual effects. If memory serves, Douglas Trumbull also worked on the visual effects for Blade Runner. And what Trumbull and Kubrick did together was, when they did the special effects, was to make it in camera. So all these beautiful shots, they accomplish this all in camera. Yeah, and it's just you're taken away by it. But I do want to compare when it comes to how technology, how technological advancements are, compared between the 2001 and Ad Astra. Right. I want to to get in there, I want to take a quick detour to a little film grammar moment.
Film grammar of the day!
And that is, we were talking about 2001 and all of the wonderful moments. And because here's the other thing with 2001, and it's something like, say, The Godfather or Citizen Kane, where when you watch it, that those movies have been parodied, referenced, maybe stolen from so many times that when you're watching, you're like, I know this. It's like you've already seen the movie. But in the case of 2001, we had to talk about the match cut. And that is 2001 probably has the most famous match cut in cinematic history. And now what a match cut is, it is a type of cut. It's so you have, two shots, and that they're usually matched by whether it's an action or whether it's by a character. I mean, it's also different from, because you know how you have sound cuts as well, where it's like one example is like in Cat People, where you hear like this, like a character, she's walking and you hear a grrr noise, and it's like, oh, is that the cat person? And then suddenly you hear a shh, and it's like, oh, it's like a cat hissing, but no, it's a bus.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, what I'm speaking of in the match cut is after the hominids have touched the monolith and are starting to evolve, and they attack the other less developed hominid group, that I think the leader of the hominid group picks up the bone and throws it in the air. You see it spinning, and it's up in the air, and it cuts to a satellite we have fast forward
Yeah.
millions of years into the future.
Similar shape too.
Yeah, we see this tool, this bone evolved we saw from humans tools from bone
From the
to,
first tool to the latest one.
to a satellite.
Yeah.
And in the case of, and there's the reason why I point that out, is that in 2001, that even though that you have the fact that technology going too far in terms of what happens with HAL 9000 and how he, murdered 4 people on the Jupiter mission.
That was so cool.
But the thing is that you look at how wonderful and how innovative things have become, and you're amazed by it, and you find yourself awestruck by it. But in the case of Ad Astra, and it's like, are they awe-inspiring images? If you do screen captures aside from the movie and you take a look at them, are those beautiful advancements? Are those beautiful technological human achievements? We did this, absolutely.
Yeah,
But-
and that was what was very awe-inspiring of that part. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is that what's the story that James Gray is telling? He's telling a story about this man who has lost his connection to humanity and how he edits it, how he shoots the technology, how he shoots Brad Pitt. It's done in a sense of it's okay and it's beautiful, but it's nothing because he doesn't have that connection.
Yeah.
He's lost all touch with humanity.
Well, it's because like going back to that message that you were talking about, like when it comes to masculinity and all that stuff, it's like it's pretty much like it seems like Gray's movies have kind of like this theme. There's pretty much like people who like risk everything in order to reach a mythical place that was supposedly make them like whole again or something. Like with his father, he didn't feel satisfied on Earth. He didn't feel satisfied with his wife and his child. That he felt that there was
Child?
some.
Did he have-
His son, Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt had a son in it?
I'm talking about Brad Pitt's dad.
Oh,
What's his name? Tommy Lee Jones.
Okay, yeah.
His character. That like it started with his father. That's what I'm saying. Like,
okay.
So his father, he didn't feel satisfied by his wife and his son, Brad Pitt, and he felt that there was something bigger out there in his mind of more intelligent life.
Yeah.
So he leaves them in order to search for that, right? And then Brad Pitt, because of that, was desensitized and believed that that's what a man is. Because after his father went missing, he was told that his father was a hero.
Abandonment.
So it's like, okay, in order to be a hero, I have to be detached from everything, So it's like, and then you're going through that journey, and then seeing all this beautiful imagery throughout the movie, and you're so detached to it, like his character. But it goes back to what you're saying, that there's still something very mesmerizing about that, though. Like I couldn't pinpoint it because, like, even though I had an issue with like when it comes to the cuts that it had in the movie, there was a point to it, like we said earlier, when it comes to timing. But there's still something so mesmerizing at the fact that, like you said, that we made this, like well, in the movie anyway.
Yeah.
Like mankind got to the point to be able to make a whole new world on Earth and make it feel realistic. Because that's one of the things that the director said as well, that he did a whole bunch of research and kind of did a little bit what Kubrick did as well when it comes to research and NASA and stuff. But the one thing that Gray did was that he got all that information and then he disregarded it.
Yeah.
Because at the end, even though he wanted to be as realistic as possible, he wasn't trying to make a realistic film.
Yeah.
So it's something pretty cool, So
Yeah, and also and bear in mind we didn't screen this other film for the movie, but Gravity, Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity. That I remember. Oh gosh, when that film came out, and a lot of people. I remember one. I believe it one. I don't know whether a scientist or astronaut, but he said that the thing about this movie isn't so much what it got it wrong, but what it got amazingly right. But the thing was, when Cuarón made the movie, the story was being told about Sandra Bullock's character, and once again her detachment from humanity. In my opinion, I think Gravity is the better film than Ad Astra, even though Ad Astra is still great. But the thing is,
really?
Yeah, I still prefer Gravity. But the thing is that when he made it, like for example, there's a scene where you see her character essentially float off into space, and there's these sea of stars all over the place. Scientifically, that is not accurate. There are that many stars surrounding her. But the thing is that what he wanted to produce was this story of her detachment from humanity as well. And just how, and it's like not so much the scientific accuracy that he's looking for. It's about the emotion. It's like how one feels when one looks at these images and how they connect to them, what they've experienced.
Exactly. And I think that's what really worked for going back to that thing, the whole Gravity and Ad Astra thing, I think they're both equally as good, but just different.
Well, yeah,
I
of
think.
course. Well, I mean, I
Because
do think Gravity's still a better film, but yeah.
Gravity has more of a pace than as 2001 than Ad Astra did, I believe, when it comes to timing a little bit. Because there was moments where we can like really sit with her and what's going on, and those moments we had in Ad Astra in different ways, but it was quicker paced. Like in the beginning scene where he was up in the satellite and they were doing some maintenance work, some repairs and stuff, and you in the theater, it's the sound of isolation. It's like if you're in the mask in his suit with him, right? So it's like, and then things start happening. You start seeing like things blow up and people falling in. You're hearing screams, but distant screams that he hears in the microphones from his helmet.
Yeah.
So it's like, I thought it was so brilliant, and it adds on to all that stuff, but it was a lot quicker though. I've completely forgot my point of it, but like I just loved that part. I wanted to throw that in there.
I think it's also like how the mise en scène of those three films of Kubrick's, Cuarón's, and Gray's. Mise en scène, that's essentially everything that we see in another film grammar. Another thing, everything that we see in the frame and how the frame is composed and such. Essentially, and Cuarón is a master of this. Also, and Kubrick as well. I mean, Kubrick has this wonderful eye, that photographer's eye, where you'd have things centered in the middle of the frame and how it comes off as a photograph, a perfectly framed photograph or a
Specifically,
painting.
the first segment.
The Dawn of Man.
Because remember, I was telling you, I'm like, this looks, is that a backdrop? What is that? Like, but it still looked realistic.
Yeah.
But you were telling me like, well, he's a photographer. And I was like, oh my God. Once you said that, I can see how the framing, like the way he framed the eye that he has for it, like it was so beautiful, and it added to like the whole mystical thing of just evolution in general. Like this, like evolution to people can sometimes feel so like fantasy a little bit. Like we know it's fucking real. Like don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people, but like there's still something very like fantasy element to evolution. Like the fact that something's able to like just change to adapt to the environment. So anyway, so like that added to that for me in the very beginning scene to set everything else. Yeah. And like you were able to just see how he would frame things and like and I remember there's terms for it, and I don't remember, like the foreground, background, or whatever.
Foreground, midground, background.
Yeah, and I think the first segment like is perfect to show that. Yeah. You know, and I love it. Like I'm getting chills again, man. I love it.
But what I was saying was, when it comes to those movies, the mise en scène in those is that, like with Gravity, that I mean, there would be these long takes that Cuarón would do with his cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki, but it would be what he would put in the frame. So Gravity is definitely the more action-oriented of the three films. Definitely, definitely.
It's more action?
Oh, definitely Gravity, of course.
Really?
Then the other two, absolutely. Of the three films, Gravity has the most action, but it's because
Ad Astra does. I believe Ad Astra
Gravity
does.
I mean, the opening sequence of Gravity, where the meteorite shower appears and it hits, and you see and how frenetic it is, the frame, even though there aren't a lot of quick cuts, but it's all in frenetic and how the action is.
But Ad Astra starts the same way, a little bit, like.
Well, no, but the thing is that I mean it does as well.
Space pirates.
Well, it does that as well, but the thing is that there's more. But the thing is that with Gravity is that it's like everything can go worse.
Location. That's why.
Well, it is, but it's also like things that get worse and worse and worse, and they can. And there is a lot of tension in there, how Cuarón packs the frame, and also when it comes to his cuts as well. But compare that to, say, how Stanley Kubrick does with 2001, that for example, in one sequence when Hal he takes over the pod to kill Frank, to cut off his oxygen supply, and Frank goes flying off into space. In any other film, we aforementioned Star Wars, even J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films, that it would be cut in such a way where it's like, okay, it's got to be frenetic editing because Dave's got to, and Dave might be running, and the music might dun dun dun
The
dun dun,
suspense,
something like
it
that.
would build suspense for sure.
But the sequence is like it's not done that way. It's actually portrayed realistically, in that it takes its time.
My mouth was open throughout the whole scene. I was like, what the fuck?
And there's the moment where it's like you hear the breathing of Frank, but then suddenly it goes quick. Those quick dun 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 close-ups on Hal, and then suddenly goes silent, and you see Frank spinning in space and the pod spinning away.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like, and you compare that to Gravity, but also the space pirate sequence in Ad Astra, or the baboon sequence in.
I think
Ad
that
Astra.
one was very. It had no point. But going back to if you're gonna mention all three films, like I feel that they showed suspense. They showed beautifully how movies can show suspense in different ways, and there was a sense of urgency still in 2001, but with a realistic. In a realistic approach, because I don't know if y'all ever had, and I'll just do one that everyone I'm sure has had, has happened to. It's rush hour traffic, and you suddenly have to pee. Okay, so that sense of feeling where you're in a hurry and you're feeling that rush, oh my god, I need to get home. But guess what? Realistically, you ain't going nowhere because you're stuck in traffic. You're gonna have to move slow. So that's a very realistic sense of urgency. I know that's such a weird explanation, but I felt like that's what 2001 gave me. And then the other one is where a quick scare or that sense of just cut, and that's it. Gravity, I felt, is more in the middle. I think it had a beautiful merge of both.
Yeah, because the thing is that with Ad Astra, I mean, if I do have a negative about Ad Astra, is that when it comes to somewhat of the more of the action sequences in the film, of the three that are presented, there's, I guess you could say 4 with the opening.
I think the opening was definitely needed, though.
I think, of course. I mean, because you got to establish what's going on with that surge. And there's the opening of that. There's the pirate sequence in the moon because of how slow it goes, and then also how it needs to get from this part of the station on the moon to the other to get to Mars. But then the other two involving a stop at I think it was a biotech laboratory space station on the way from the moon to Mars, that involved a couple of baboons that were released, and they killed the crew members. And the other one involving the sequence where Brad Pitt, where he gets onto the Mars rocket, and then there's a bit
I
of
like
action
that sequence
too. But there's a part of me that's I feel that in 2001, if 2001 was made today, they would have to include a sequence like that.
Yeah, I don't feel like a movie like that would ever be able to be made today, but that's only because of the instant gratification era that we're in. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, with something like Ad Astra, and Ad Astra, I should say. The reason why Ad Asner. That's what you should call it, Ad Asner.
Oh my god.
I hate Sputnik. That with Ad Astra, this is as close as we can to 2001, and that's when he talked about Marvel movies. The director James Gray, where he would talk about that. He has nothing against Marvel movies, but I've noticed there's a lot of people complaining about how Disney is taking over in the Marvel films, the comic book films. A lot of people are upset of all these superhero films coming out, and people are wondering, is that what cinema is going to be? James Gray mentions, I love going to these type of movies, but the thing is, he makes a comparison to food. Let's say you go to the grocery store and you want to get cereal, but all they have is Special K cereal. And that's the problem, is that here's the thing, and a lot of people are I don't like a movie like this. I want to go see Fast and Furious. Okay, then go see Fast and Furious. But there are people like me and Salome. We want a variety of movies because that's what's wonderful about art. That you've got Picasso and you've got Da Vinci and Michelangelo.
Frida Kahlo, man. Mention the women in there, goddammit.
Frida Kahlo, or also
Diego Rivera, or so. We get it. Yes.
Yeah, that is you want, and also with directors that Kubrick is a different director from Cuarón.
And this is my first
Yeah.
Kubrick film, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah.
And
Okay.
a different director from Grey. That they're all three filmmakers with their own three unique visions.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny, like that. Gray was mentioning about the budgeting of the film. That he, let me see. I'm going to try to pull up his actual quote, because people were saying that it was kind of like the movie could have been a little bit dry because of the kind of movie it is.
Yeah.
And they were comparing it to 2001 and Gravity, and he was saying that it's not Gravity. He's like, I certainly tried to put some red meat in there. You've got Brad Pitt falling off a space antenna and getting mixed up in a lunar rover chase and climbing up to the outside of the rocket.
Fighting a baboon.
Yeah, and getting into zero-G fight. There's a lot of that. But if the studio wants to get people off the couch, they're going to have to offer them something a little bit different. He's like, otherwise it will leave a business totally about Marvel. So it's kind of like what you're talking about when it comes to this kind of audience, that some people are saying like, no, you only need to have action. And he's like, no, I'll give you a little action, like the baboon sequence and the space pirates and stuff. But let me give you a little bit of 2001, because all y'all mofos don't watch that movie, right? So let's put it into mainstream, and like being able to merge both of them together. And like he did say there's nothing wrong with Marvel movies. Like he loves watching them with his kids and stuff like that. But being able to put both movies, or like the different kind of style approaches to it together, that it can bring a whole new art form a little bit to a new audience. Because if like me, I never heard, well, I have heard of 2001 Space Odyssey, but it was never on my list to watch, because I was like, nah, that movie sounds too artsy fartsy. Like, I don't want to watch that. Just give me Vin Diesel, racing a race car, and throw me in some rock. Like, I'm good. So when I watched 2001 and being like exposed to a completely new type of art form in movies, and then being able to see that directors nowadays are trying to bring that back, it's so cool. And it's going to expose our future kids, or even the new generation, like what art can actually be. It doesn't just have to be fighting. It just doesn't have to be blowing up.
Yeah.
There could be an art form to it, yes, I'm sure, but there's more to that, and you can do that by doing this,
Yeah, that ultimately a quality of a film isn't so much dependent on the quality of the action sequence per se. That it has to be more than that. I mean, you have to care for the characters. You have to care for the story. Or in the case of 2001, if the images are so awe-inspiring. Because the thing about 2001 also is that what's awe-inspiring about the movie is that, yes, you get to see these technological achievements, and this is what I loved about it, and this is why I was like, I can't wait to see how Salome reacts to the movie, the usage of the score throughout the film whenever the monolith would appear, that it was the music is just completely scary and terrifying and unnerving.
It genuinely freaked me out after a while.
Because it is scary, because it's this unknown entity, this black slab. I mean, what is it? Marble? What kind of rock is it? This gigantic monolith, and just how terrifying and scary it is, but also how awe-inspiring it is. Because the thing is, when you go through Discovery, when you go through those things, just how scary and unnerving it could be.
Yeah, it's scary, but it's like a light that attracts mosquitoes a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like you don't know. Well, I mean, the light is dangerous for the mosquito. Anyways, but like it's calling you, it's drawing you in, but you don't know if this is good or bad.
Yeah.
And in the movie, I love how it didn't really have either or precision, I guess. It's kind of like, I interpret it as like, leave it up to you type of thing. Like, I don't know. You tell me if that was the goal or not. But like, it every time that came up, and especially that music that you were talking about, I literally, the more it started happening, the more I started getting freaked out.
Yeah.
I was like, can you turn down the volume? Because it's actually genuinely freaking me out, which is the reason why you need to watch this movie in theaters for sure.
Yeah,
actually, both movies, like you said, both movies.
Get a good surround system going for you, and if you do, you're good to go. But just also thinking about when it comes to 2001, this I absolutely love, and that is when people ask, why is it that when Kubrick made the film, where there are 3 instances of total complete darkness in 2001. At the beginning, the intermission in the middle of the film, and then at the end, where it's just completely black. And in the first 2 instances, they share the same music.
Yeah.
And then at the third, it's the conclusion of the Blue Danube Waltz. And people are like, oh, why did Kubrick did that? And that is this. The film is shot in scope. And what thing in 2001 is long and black and rectangular? It's the monolith. So what's happening is, as we as viewers, we have seen the monolith 3 times. And Kubrick has shown that to us, but we're not aware of it. But you have to think about that. Widescreen, rectangular, like the black monolith, and we're staring right at it. And it's a little attention to detail that you don't necessarily need, because it's like, it's not necessarily will enhance or not, but you know it, and it makes the movie even more special.
Yeah, like I will disagree in the sense that I think it added to it. Like, it enhanced it so much. But if it didn't have that,
Well, I mean, if you didn't know it.
if I didn't know that it was the black bar thingy,
Yeah, then you didn't know it was the monolith.
No, the thing is, I didn't know it was that. Like,
Yeah, but it's still enhanced. I mean,
for
it's
me,
still
it
there,
enhanced
but-
it there so much, just in the sense of, because I didn't think of the black thingy. I forgot the
The
word.
monolith.
Sure, that I didn't think of that
The black
whatsoever.
thingy.
the black
The
thingy.
black dingus.
Oh my god. Anyways, like the thingy, until like you mentioned it to me a few hours after watching the movie. But for me, it added to just the uneasiness of everything, just of life itself. I'm sorry. Every time I say life, I always want to do that. But I don't know. I felt it added to it so much, and just I think both movies. Okay, at the end of the day, y'all, I think we both give both movies a thumbs up, right? Like,
Enthusiastic thumbs up to both. Just bear in mind, though, that they are not going to be Star Wars, Star Trek movies. They're not going to be these films where it's quickly cut. These are films that do take their time. Ad Astra doesn't take its time as much as 2001 does,
No, it
but when
doesn't.
you compare Ad Astra to other space films, the aforementioned Star Wars movies,
Yeah.
it definitely does show indeed that Ad Astra takes more of its time looking at the images and letting you be absorbed in them. 2001 definitely holds up, that it's been over 50 years since it came out, and it still astonishes me the effects in that film. It truly does.
I'm gonna say that honestly, 2001. I love movies, like, you know that, right? But I don't have that kind of knowledge, like at least you do anywhere, when it comes to like how films are made, or like the certain terms and stuff like that. So I never really looked at how movies were made before. I just loved the acting and loved the story, and that's it. So, but I feel that 2001 really like clicked something for me in the sense of what an artistic movie actually is. Because I always use the term artsy fartsy, because I felt like, no, those are for people who are like muy feety and like they look down on other people, so it's gonna be like an Andy Warhol type of film that no one's gonna fucking know what the fuck is going on or some shit. I don't know if Andy Warhol did actually do a movie, but anyways, but the point is, it's like, but when I saw this movie, it just, and finding out the backstory of how it was made, of how he went to NASA instead of using film or like a film design people, or just really doing their research, it kind of, it makes you really appreciate the art of film. So if anyone wants to start looking into movies a little bit more, or just art in general, you don't have to be a movie lover, but just art, you really need to watch this movie, like, and really see it, because it's so fucking good. And oh god, I don't even know what to say other than it's so fucking good,
Yeah. And the answer is that yes, Andy Warhol did work on some movies. I mean,
Did he?
Oh yeah, he definitely did to help, like like he got Blood for Dracula, Flesh for Frankenstein, stuff like that.
Well, I've never seen them, so I don't care. But I really don't give a shit.
But no, it's like, the thing is that I would just say to people who they see 2001 or an Ad Astra and they go, this isn't like a Fast and Furious or a Star Wars or any of those movies. It's like, yeah, no, they're not. And that's what sets them apart. And I would highly recommend to definitely go check them out. And if you ultimately don't like them, then yeah, you don't like them. That's okay. Doesn't make you less stupid, if you feel like that, oh, it just wasn't meant for me. It's not every movie is going to be meant for everybody.
Oh, yeah. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Yeah.
At all.
I mean, think of it this way. When it comes to the music you love, the books you love to read, the paintings that you gravitate towards, that there are reasons why people have their preferences. The only thing I would say is, especially with these two movies, go watch them. Go give them a look. And just experience them. And if they're not your cup of tea, they're not. But they are monumental. They are monumental movies, especially Kubrick's 2001.
Because you're gonna see how once you see 2001, you're gonna see how other movies were inspired by it.
Yeah.
For sure. Because
Yeah.
I actually was honestly thinking of Looney Tunes throughout the whole thing. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It meant more like I never watched a movie that was so like it was centered so much around the
classical
music, and the only thing I was exposed to was Looney Tunes as a kid.
Yeah.
So it brought me so much joy to be able to see art in a different form that's not just as a child, like with animation, but just actually like this. It was pretty cool. So if you like Looney Tunes and like those like I don't want to call them skits, but those short films like
shorts.
that all have to do with classical music, honestly, I think you might like 2001. But don't expect comedy. That's not what I mean. But although that whole beautiful merge of ballet and art and
although like quick before we conclude this episode is that I do think that there is a sense of humor that Kubrick does employ in the films. I mean, when in the second sequence set to the Blue Danube, when you see one of the like next to the toilet stall and he's like reading the instructions on it. I mean,
that part was funny.
Yeah, there is a matter of factness to it, and that's what makes it funny because you're going to use a space toilet and you got to make certain to read all of the instructions on how to use a space toilet. It's funny.
And the timing was perfect for that because I remember in the very beginning I was like, okay, so he's reading the instructions. But then it hit me as like, oh wait, gravity.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, literally. Like, what are you gonna do? So it hits you even fun. It becomes funny. So okay, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
There's a lot of movies like that.
Exactly. So this is going to conclude our episode of Something Old, Something New, where we covered 2001: A Space Odyssey and Ad Astra. We highly recommend both movies. Try to see them in the theater if you can.
Yeah, if possible. If not, then wait till y'all have surround sound at your home because you really need to have that experience for sure.
Exactly. And next week's episode is the opposite of space adventure.
Are you sure?
Well, maybe. Well, I mean, when it comes to like large, long objects that people have to use. Or
round globes. What are you talking about, man?
So,
tell the people what we're watching next week.
We are going to be comparing and contrasting the 1995 release of Showgirls and the 2019 sleeper hit Hustlers.
I can't wait, guys. Oh, I can't wait to see J-Lo. You have no idea. I can't wait.
Yeah, and so that's going to be for this week for Something Old, Something New. This is David.
And this is Salome.
And we're all saying goodbye.
Bye.